This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations.
We want families to come here and gain insightful strategies that empower them to successfully teach diverse learners at home.
Hosted by founder and CEO of SPED Homeschool, Peggy Ployer.
Our goal is that these powerful weekly conversations will boost your confidence to cultivate the best at-home learning environment for your student.
For more homeschool resources, go to spedhomeschool.com. You're listening to Empowering Homeschool Conversations with Peggy Ployer.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Empowering Homeschool Conversations. Today, we are going to talk about 3 things that boost at-home learning, and my special guest is Sarah Collins from Homeschool OT, also Collins Academy Therapy Services. She's has 15 years as an experience as an occupational therapist, plus 7 years as a homeschool mom. And she's the owner of those 2 amazing businesses I just rattled off. Homeschool OT, that serves homeschool families for occupational therapy questions, needs, and then Collins Academy Therapy Services that services health professionals working with homeschool families. And Sarah, you have been an amazing influence in the homeschool community, and I'm just honored to have you back on the show to talk about these 3 things that that any parent can do to boost at-home learning. I'm excited for what you have to share.
Well, thank you. That's such a fantastic opening. I haven't actually even heard your new snazzy music. So I was
I know everything has changed since you've been on the show.
Right. But yeah, thank you for saying that. It has been a wild ride, since Homeschool OT, we opened in 2019, and it has been just a lovely growth period. And I just feel so honored to be able to serve in the way that we are. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we're gonna talk about some things that Sarah had on her heart early in the year. She contacted me and said, "I want to be back on the show. I want to talk about this." And I think I definitely know this is a conversation that you just all need to hear, because I think it gets to the root of a lot of the things that we're struggling with when we're teaching unique children.
Yeah.
And sometimes we skip over these what seem like very simple things, but yet in our philosophy of homeschooling, we think they're so simple that we don't even have to pay attention to them.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of you know, because we do have diverse learners, and each kid in our own house is different from each other. We are all
Right.
uniquely wired, right? So it would be a lot easier if we were coming on this conversation and I was like, all right, these are the exact 3 things that I want you to do.
Right.
I
Exactly.
think you need to, use these manipulatives and buy this curriculum, and everyone would be happy, right?
Right. Yes, you can check those boxes and we can
Yes.
purchase, and then everything's gonna be perfect, right?
Right. So easy. So easy. So instead, we're going to think a little bit more philosophical, kind of like what you were saying, but really making sure that this is what everybody can do. Yes, these simple things that everyone can do within their home schools. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
Awesome.
without further ado,
Yeah.
I'm going to kind of
Well,
roll through some of these.
I'm gonna put this the slides up,
Okay.
and then also Sarah, I just want everybody to know that if they have questions or comments during the show, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, we're on all those 3 places right now. Just know that you can put comments, questions down. I'm going to be watching those as Sarah's talking, and hopefully we'll be able to incorporate some of those questions. And we did have some questions submitted ahead of the show too that we're going to incorporate, some maybe in the middle because she's going to be addressing some of these topics, but also addressing the other ones at the end. So
Perfect.
all right, go for it, Sarah.
All right. So, what you and I kind of started talking about is that we are, each of us is unique, and just the more that I read about with neuroscience, with interpersonal biology, theology, homeschool philosophy, worldview, and guys, I'm a big reader. I read all the time, although I will say I did not before I was homeschooling.
Really?
But I know it has been kind of a beautiful part of me being a lead learner and working alongside of my kids, and part of setting that model for them.
Right.
But within that, the more that I was almost looking for those very specific things that are going to be what is going to work for my children, right? And
Yeah.
because of that, kind of the smaller I feel and the more humble that I have to become continually.
Absolutely.
And so that then I become more and more grateful that we can be individualized. And so that's kind of how we're going to go through this, is just coming from that perspective that we are all very unique. And yet what we're trying to do is to help our children to be successful in what they specifically need and want to do for that they are all, the handiwork, and they all have different things that the works that they've been prepared in advance for them to do. So we have to come alongside of them. So a big piece of that is knowing, okay, so what is learning and how are we going to boost that? So what is learning? So Charlotte Mason, good old Charlotte, I'm telling you, if she, someone asked me once, one of those dinner table questions, and they were like, who is one person from history that you would like to meet? And Charlotte Mason is now my person. Like, I really find her so fascinating. The books that I've read of hers, everything. But so she describes learning as the science of relations. So this was, all the way back in the good old 1800s. Now we, in 2010, Queen's University. My goodness, can you hear my dog in the background?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I don't
That's
know what
okay. We are live, so that
Wow.
happens.
Okay. Well, this is the homeschooling mom, working mom here that we have going on. Okay. He will stop in a moment. It's probably the Amazon guy. He does not like
Oh, yeah, mine does the same thing. So
All right. So Queen's University, they said or defined learning as deep and long-lasting learning that involves understanding, relating ideas, and making connections between prior and new knowledge, independent and critical thinking, the ability to transfer knowledge into different contexts. Which I feel like if you read that and then you summarize it, it means it's the science of relations, right?
yes,
It goes right back to
absolutely.
the same thing.
Mhm.
Sanjay Sarma, who wrote a book in 2020 called Grasp, which is fascinating, guys. It is
Huh.
all the history of education put together with science of learning. It is it's a tough read. It's a lot, but it is fantastic. And he said, encountering a chunk of information that forces you to change or reframe your prior body of knowledge, leading to curiosity. And that's how he defines learning. I actually really like that definition
Yeah,
too.
that is
So
wonderful.
if we're going from that really what we're trying to do is help our children to make connections across environments or
Right.
across make relationships across subjects, and boosting their curiosity,
Yeah,
then there's a lot of freedom in that, in what exactly
absolutely.
how to learn.
Mhm.
So here's kind of our goals and how I'm going to work through this then. So if we're under that mindset that we can make these connections and relationships when we are curious, right? Then some 3 things that we want to do. Number 1, we need to observe our children, right? We want to know, like, what strengths do they have? What do they need to
Yeah.
build? Like, where are we right now? We need to consider the environments and how they're going to cater to that curiosity.
Mhm.
And we need to seek out activities. So there you are. There's your top 3. It is not as easy as buy some manipulatives in the specific curriculum.
Right,
It is
exactly.
things that everybody can do. And we're gonna talk through what that looks like. But
Great.
so observe, consider the environment, and seek out activities. So how are we going to observe? All right. We, Peggy, you and I, when we talked a couple years ago, I used these same terms when we went through the skills that
Yeah,
nature can build. Um,
right.
because what these are is how the occupational therapy practice framework. So these
Okay.
are the skills, how they define motor skills, cognitive skills, and social skills. Because so many of us are like, well, to be able to write, we need to be able to, just hold our pencil and have that grasp and have fine motor skills. But then they're like, what are fine motor skills, right?
Exactly, yes. It seems
So
so vague to all of us that
exactly.
aren't in your field.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna kind of go through these, and then don't worry, I do have a little video to show some of them
Great.
to you. So, but if we're thinking motor skills, you need to be able to stabilize your body. One of the biggest things that we say in the OT world is proximal stability leads to distal mobility. So what that means is if
Ah.
you are stabilizing, like for example, when you're sitting, and this just made me change my posture, if you can tell, but your core strength is what's holding you upright so that then you can move your hands and your body. If you're
Right.
like slouching down, you have less movement. I mean, just, lean forward in your chair, guys, and you can
Right.
see you cannot lift your arms up nearly as high as you can when you are really stable here. So
Right.
having that core strength or that stability, that's one of the motor skills to align your body. So if you're, slouched over again and your head is to the side, your
Absolutely.
body systems are off, your sensory systems are off, and it's a lot harder to be able to move those hands that you need to be able to reach to know where you're going or how far up you need to reach to grab something. Bending, again, how far down can you bend? Grip. So that would be, there's lots of different grips and grasps, but what do you need to do to pick up one object? What I need to do to pick up a pencil is different than what I need to do to pick up my water bottle.
Right.
um, Manipulate. So if I need to be able to write, I also need to be able to move my pencil around. Or if I'm going to put change in a soda machine, well, does anyone really do that anymore? But
I
whatever.
don't know.
No,
They just slide their credit card in or
yeah, right.
yeah.
If I need to turn on my phone or pull out my
Right,
card,
exactly.
can I do that and move that, card around to the position that it needs to be? Um, Coordination. So this is including, oh goodness, this is including your eyes and also your hands. Can you coordinate like how much force, but also the movement so it's accurate to do what you wanted it to do?
Yes.
Move would be carrying something. Move and transport kind of go together. So can you move your body from one space to another, lift up something, walk, transport that item to another area?
Got it.
um, Calibrate is, if you're thinking about, this is my best example, the Amazon man, right, who just came and made
Yep.
my dog so mad. If I thought that in this box was like a bunch of paper towels, but in reality it is like 4 bowling balls, right? And so I go to pick it up and I don't have the right force. That's the calibration.
Yes. Got
It would
it.
either, I would hurt my back, or if it was paper towels, they would flow them in, throw them in the sky. So um,
Right. It's like changing how that muscle bodies are reacting to whatever force is on it versus the slower term reaction.
right. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And flow is like how smooth those things are. Are you having to
Got it.
stop and really think about each separate movement? You can imagine this for kids who are trying to learn to handwrite, and their D, is it like a big, very long line down that they're having a hard time stopping and moving, and then they
Right.
have to make their curve? Or are we, just moving along letter to letter to letter? Do we have a nice flow of those skills?
Yeah.
Endure and pace also go together. Like, think about if you are, running a mile, can you endure that and set your same pace? Or are you like slow and start and slow and start, and you don't have enough endurance to make it to
Right.
the end? So these are our motor skills. And so if we're observing these things, like when you're
Yes.
watching your children do handwriting, or you're watching them, play ball outside, you can be observing for these same skills throughout and say, what are their strengths? What are not? And how
Yep.
does this play into learning? So here's an example. Here's my son. He's playing with his skateboard, like, or his little like hand skateboard, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Which, P.S., he built this little skate park on his own.
Oh, that's so
So
cool.
yeah, isn't that so fun? So that is one of those little fingerboards that he's moving side to side. He's built this thing on his desk. And so if you saw how he's sitting in his desk chair, right? So he had to stabilize his core and his shoulder as he's moving along. Because if he is reaching across and all, if his core is really sloppy or slouched, he's not going to have the same movement with his upper body. He
Exactly.
had to align his head and his torso as they were rotating. He's reaching all over that desk, across his body, bending his elbows, his wrist, his fingers. He was gripping there, but with the top of his fingers, if you could see that. And
Right.
then, right? And then manipulating it around with his thumb and his fingers, coordinating that move between jumps and changing, how hard he is holding on to that
Right.
skateboard as he's allowing it to move and not fall. So these are all motor skills just in one section. So I'm sure you're looking at that and being like, cool, Sarah, but what does that have to do with learning? Like,
Haha.
just playing the game, right? Okay, you're right. But again, if you think about what we're doing, the science of relations, how he's connecting these things across, if you can do that with your skateboard,
Right.
your writing is very different. If
Exactly.
you are so slouched, it is very difficult for you to be able to functionally to put dishes away, also to be able to sit at a table to eat your dinner, also to be able to sit at a table and write. These skills, they carry over directly.
Oh,
If you are not
absolutely.
stable or even able to coordinate your eyes and your hands, reading is very difficult. If you can't do
Yeah.
those things, then learning reading from any books is also very difficult. So
Right.
that's
Yeah,
how this all carries over and how we want to be observing even these motor skills to see
absolutely.
how they impact learning.
Yeah, that's amazing that, because the thing that I think we get taught too much is, well, we're just teaching them wrong. And so we got to just
Mm,
change our strategy instead of going back again, like we were talking at the very beginning. These are very basic, very simple
yeah,
things, but it's so simple. Again, we miss them. And
right,
so,
right.
yeah,
And absolutely, guys, if we just go back and look at that same kiddo right there who is doing that did not read and write until he was 9 and 10 years old,
yeah,
because he was missing many of those underlying skills of his vision. And there's other podcasts and things where I tell that whole story. We don't have time to get into that whole thing
yeah.
today,
I'll have
but
to link all your old or your older episodes.
yes.
Yep. Hmm.
Absolutely, to go through. He is always, I run through before, we start these things where I'm like, what can I talk about today? Because it is his story and not mine.
Right.
But
Exactly.
a big piece of getting him to where he is now, where he is able to read and to write, came from focusing in on these other motor skills, on his core strength, on his fine motor skills, on his visual motor skills, on his coordination. All of those things played into whether he could read and write. If all I was doing
Absolutely.
was forcing him, like, here's your book, keep
Right.
reading, keep reading, keep reading, or just keep copy work, just keep copy work, we wouldn't be where we are today.
Right.
So it is
Yeah.
important to look at these small observable actions.
Absolutely.
So process skills. So these are kind of like the cognitive skills that we talk about, and they again are small observable skills that as you're going through your day, if you can look and see what is going well here, what is not, and
Yes.
is this similar across like different subjects or different environments. So here are your process skills. So attending, you guys, people talk all the time about attention and how long can you pay attention and what should you be doing to pay attention? How do you show that you're paying attention?
Right.
So that within itself requires a lot of observation. How long is a person able to focus? Are they, alert and really taking in information and processing it? And so that might look different for your child versus, my child versus Susie's child over there.
Yeah.
Um, it used to be that we would say, if you're sitting very still and your eyes are looking forward, 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, that means that you're attending. Now we know that's not necessarily the truth. And
Right.
again, even if we talk about Caleb, my son there, like when he is playing his Legos or even when he's playing with, that skateboard or whatever, his curiosity is piqued. That's one of the things that Sanjay Sarma was talking about. And so he is able to attend more. And I can find that for him specifically by asking, like, I'll be like, what did you hear? What did you see? What did you touch? Try to get into asking him questions and he can typically tell me back. Now, if he was so focused on sitting in his chair to keep his eyes on me, he would not be attending. He would be
Yes.
focused on holding his body still. So these are very important when you're going along with your observations. How can you tell if your child is paying attention and how can you not? This range very much by person to person. So choosing and using, they kind of go together. Like, can you choose the right utensil? Like, okay, so I need to do this art project. I need a pair of scissors and a ruler. Or do you not know how to choose those right tools and then use them correctly and handle them correctly, right? So we're not like running with scissors and cutting out hair, but the
Right.
paper, right? um, and again, this is a developmental range here, guys. When they're two, probably going to cut their hair.
Yeah.
Um,
Can tell you've been there, done that.
oh, for sure, for sure. And looking at this hair today, my goodness, those of you who are on YouTube, it is quite humid here
Lots
in
of human.
Pennsylvania. Maybe I need to be using my scissors for that. Oh, anyway, so I digress. Inquiring. So that's asking the right questions at the right times, showing that, if I'm reading to you about, plants, that you're not asking me some random question about what's for dinner tonight, but
Right.
you are in on what we are doing. Initiating would be, we hear a lot about let kids be bored and they'll initiate activity. Okay, that's a process skill in itself, to be able to
Yeah.
come up with something to do, to find the tools that you need to then get started, to then
Right.
continue, sequence along, going until you're finishing. Guys, you see how many skills that just took. So
Right.
where I do really appreciate people saying, like, remove the screens, let them be bored, encourage them. We need to make sure that that is within their ability first.
Right.
And that
And
comes
scaffold
from,
it until the
yes.
point that they're ready,
Uh-huh.
because otherwise they're just gonna end up more frustrated because they
Yes.
haven't got the lower skills to do
Right.
that. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. So things like, if we're talking in that way, like how to help our kids initiate something, maybe we are asking a question first. What can
Mhm.
you do now? That's very open-ended and puts it right on them. If they're looking at you like, "I have no idea. If I
Right.
knew that, I would be doing it," right? Then they
Right.
probably need more help. They need something like, "Oh, here are, 3 different activities. What of those could you do?" Or something like, "What does your body feel like it needs to do now? Does it
Right.
wanna sit? Does it wanna run?" We helping them to be in tune with their bodies so that they know, like, right now I'm tired and I just want to sit and read, or I feel
Yes.
like I can't do this math anymore. I'm feeling very intense. Let me go outside and run around. Like, these
Yeah.
are very, very different feelings internally that we need to help them to recognize so that they can initiate. Um,
Absolutely.
Organizing. So if we are saying, here's this project we need to do, can you choose and use those supplies together? Can we keep them all organized, restore them back, put them away at the end? How many people can actually put away their toys? Whew. Or their stuff,
Or their dishes or
right?
yes.
Please. But if you're seeing that across environments, or across, like, they don't put away their toys, they don't put away their dishes, they don't put away
Absolutely.
their project here, we need to back up and say, why is that? What am I observing here? Generally, if they're not doing it across many environments or many different things, it's because we need to scaffold that skill a little bit
Yeah.
better.
Mhm.
um, Navigating. So this is a big one, especially, knowing where you are in your own house, knowing where you are outside of your house and how safe are you,
Mhm.
being able to get from one place to another. This is a process skill of, think of everything you have to know about your surroundings and safety to be able to navigate a space.
Right.
So um, that in itself, again, if you're finding kids who are not safe, or are safe only in their one environment, they know I can't, touch the oven in here, but yet we go to, a friend's house and they don't recognize the same tools, then okay, we need to be focusing in on that recognition of items and
Absolutely.
safety rules and all of that.
Mhm.
um, Noticing and responding. I will tell you, we started last year for my son a chore that is specifically notice and respond. So every morning, when we're kind of deciding, what is we call it our coop time, because I'm a big nerd. This is how we take care of our coop here at home. We also own chickens, so sometimes coop time is literally cleaning out the coop. But
Yeah, so one of my kids' favorite activities when we had a farm.
we love it. We love it. But notice, like, what do you see around you that needs to be done, and
Oh,
how
that's
can you
great.
respond to it? So I ask him that in the morning. And when it's hard, or when he's not coming up with something, I'll pick like a spot in the room. Okay, so look around your room right now. What should be done in here? Maybe it's laundry on the floor, maybe it's things that are under the bed that are now spilling from, I don't know how it happens.
Right.
Things that are under the bed are now not under the bed. Like, how did they get there to begin with? I don't know.
Right.
But so notice and respond to that situation.
Yeah.
Um, And then adjusting, which is a big one for kids. If, you have one plan or your rhythm for your day and
Right.
something changes, can you adjust to that? So I'm going to show you a picture.
Absolutely.
This is my daughter here. She is doing the dishes. I mentioned that, we do have a chore time in our day, but for Annabelle, who is now 15, she's been working on time management a lot and organizing, right? So that was a big piece of it. And so I told her, we always go out before school starts every year. We one-on-one with each of our kids. I have 3 home with us. And so we go out and we set up, like, what do you think that your chores should be this year? What should your responsibilities around our house be? And we were talking about her time management. So her role is to take care of our breakfast dishes. Now, since we're working on time management, if she doesn't do them after breakfast, all those dishes from lunch then pile up, right? So she
Yes.
has to actually make that choice of, am I going to do them now? Am I going to do them later? There's a natural consequence built in there for her to
Right.
do. I do not say, Annabelle, do the dishes, Annabelle, Annabelle, Annabelle. She just has that.
Right.
So that's where I'm saying she manages her time during her own day. So here's my girl. I was waiting for that because, other than that, she's just a person washing dishes, right?
Right.
I'm going to be telling people about how this is still school. Things like how you have to manage your time wisely to be down here and get everything done.
Like her self-awareness in there.
Right.
So she was shifting her attention back and forth from focusing right on those dishes to then talking to me, then going
Having the
back.
yeah.
Yeah. And even if we look back at those motor skills, the calibration of holding those dishes, of not dropping them in there, knowing how to hold your bowl versus your cup, how to handle each object, knowing the sequence of activity, what comes first, second, third,
Right.
noticing if water is out on the counter and then responding to that. So no one or on the floor. So no one else comes by and, falls flat on our faces.
Right.
Now, these, again, you can say, great, Sarah, cool, I can watch all these things, but what does that have to do with learning? Well, think about a project that you have to have the
Exactly.
first, second, and third things that you're doing, and you need to be able to carry on. If we're looking at younger ages, even with the motor plan of handwriting, of making your big line down and then your curve, there is a first and a second thing to do. Or when we're then moving on from writing letters to writing sentences, does each one have a subject and a verb? There is a sequence in that. So
Right.
when we're practicing these process skills across all environments during the day, whether it is literally sitting down and doing what we would think of academia, or we are living our everyday life, you are still practicing these same skills.
Absolutely.
So we're observing them.
Yeah.
All right. Whew. Anyway, right, we're rolling through. Social skills. Aren't these your favorite here as homeschoolers? Because how many times people worry about our
Yes.
our poor children and their social skills.
And so nice
And
of them to worry for us.
isn't it? And like the snarky part of me wants to be like, oh, did you know that there are actually 21 different social skills? And would you like to know how I
How I homeschool with each of them.
right? I don't think that's really so much.
You got to make a video like that, I
Yeah,
think.
right?
It just, yeah.
Yeah, which one of these are you thinking of? And I will say that, again, just the same as attention, as we are doing more and more research and learning more and more about neurodiversity and how to be affirming, there are a lot of these in here, like eye contact, that we used to say is very important, or being able to match your language. Like, I talk to my mom a little bit different than I talk to, like, my friend down the street. In fact, my son, who came back from camp this summer, and wanted to call me bruh every 5
Oh,
seconds.
no.
This is not happening. Right? So we had to be able to change that,
Right.
that language in there. So some of those are a little bit different when we're thinking about being neurodiversity affirming. So as I go through these, though, I do just want to kind of say these are how we, as the occupational therapy framework, or AOTA, has defined social skills so we can observe for them within our homes. Okay. So
Got it.
being able to approach someone to talk or start, a conversation, to
Right.
actually literally produce speech. If you're looking at me with all of my gestures here,
Right.
that's having appropriate gestures, turning towards someone if they're talking to you and looking at them. Again, this is different based on people, but this is how
Absolutely.
we want to observe to see, like, okay, are you able to do that? And if not, how are you showing that you're listening? And how are you showing that you're engaging? Or how should I do that for you so that you are comfortable,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
Like these observation skills are still very important, whether or not we are expecting that to happen or not. Touching appropriately. So, if you touch someone's shoulder or, we're not going to punch them in the middle, but knowing what is appropriate touch. And again, that varies person to person. So,
Right.
knowing what is okay and how to ask if that's okay or not.
Right.
Regulates is more when we're thinking of social skills. If you like walk into a room and you can feel like two people are arguing, right? Do you all of a sudden feel really, really anxious and like join that argument, or are you able to keep yourself calm within that argument? Same thing if, they're laying on the couch and you walk into a room from work or you given a presentation and you're all hyped up. Are you like, ah, hey, nice to see you?
Right.
Or can you regulate to what is happening? Do you have the judgment of seeing what's happening in that room? Asking appropriate questions and giving the replies to that, disclosing the right information in different environments, right? So
Yes. Uh-huh.
we've all had that.
The overshares. Yes.
Mom, why's that lady so fat? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And expressing emotion in a way that people can understand what you are needing. Also, being able to observe other people's emotions, that self-advocacy kind of goes along in there.
Right. It does.
And being able to disagree with someone. And wow, right? Isn't this
I think that's probably where social skills cut off in most of our society right now.
so true. So true. Being able to be thankful and, tell
Yes.
someone, thank you for doing that. Transitioning between different conversations or, if you are, in different areas. And again, this is kind of that matching your language, but moving between two different things. Timing your responses so you're not either like talking over someone or you're not just being completely ignored, right? Both of those.
Right.
Being able to take turns. So, and that's, yes, in a game, absolutely, that's a social skill, but also in a conversation. And guys, I also want to say in here for our AAC users, this is the same information that we want them to be able to do, or the same skills.
Right.
However you are
Great point.
communicating, that is your least restrictive, way of communicating. So if you're using an AAC, it's the same thing. We want you to be able to time your responses, to take turns it is a little bit harder to match language, but it's not impossible. And especially the more and more used to using devices that you are. If you say a word to me and I don't understand, can you then clarify it? Or sorry, if I say a word and you don't understand, can I clarify what that means? Matching your knowledge. Anyone ever have a know-it-all, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So knowing what you don't know, that's a very important part.
Absolutely.
Or recognizing when you are the expert in the room and that your voice has value. Or maybe
Right.
you're not the expert in the room, but you still, your words still have value. So being able to express yourself in different environments so that you can get your point across. Empathizing with other people, recognizing where others are in their lives, in that conversation, just being able to really focus in on, I am not the center of the world here.
Right.
And then make accommodations for that person. There's something in research where we've been talking about the double empathy problem, meaning that many times we want autistic folks to be able to accommodate to us, to the neurotypical world. But many times we're not empathizing and we're not looking at what their situation is to make our world more accommodating, right? So we
Right.
need to be looking at both. This is the double empathy problem.
Mm.
So putting the onus on the both of us to accommodate each
Yes.
other rather than one having, you got it. And then
Yeah.
recognizing the benefits in different situations. And that kind of goes along with the thanks and feeling grateful. That is a very important piece of our world
Yeah.
and social skills. So let's just watch these two little guys. These are my two 7-year-olds here. And if you just watch them kind of playing out in the creek, so you can see them. I forget I don't know. They made up some game here. They had sticks and they were eating them or not really eating them, but pretending
Right.
to eat them
Yeah.
hot dogs. And then once they finished, throwing them back out into the water. But you can watch them they turn to each other. They're looking, they're passing those sticks back and forth in this game. Somehow, whatever role play that they made up, they both knew what they were doing.
Right. Yes.
And you can't hear exactly what they're saying, which I think is part of my favorite part. But I could tell Liam, who's the little guy on the right, I could tell he was asking a question because then I watched Reese, who is my other little guy who's on the left. I watched him shrug his shoulders. So he was replying to that question, whatever it was. And you can tell
Right.
that from far away. So you
Mhm.
know that they're gesturing. They are in whatever zone it is that
Yeah.
they're able to answer. They're accommodating each other. They don't need to match my knowledge, but they are matching their language over there together. And
Right.
then if they come and talk to me about it, right, later on. So again, you're like, Sarah, cool, but what does all this have to do with homeschooling and getting through? So if we can observe these skills in our kids where they're playing, when they're interacting with us, at the table or when we're
Right.
eating or when we're studying, and they can change the social skills that they need across these environments, then when they're going into museums and then they're on a team and these things carry over and are
Absolutely.
necessary with whatever that they're doing.
Yeah.
All right. Whew. So that's what we're observing. And then we're helping them to make the academic connections through that. So again, it's
Right.
the science of relations, right? So if I wanted to, after my little guys out there were playing outside, if I needed to, or I wanted to talk to them about, wow, did you see that stick float? Did you not? We're bringing in science there. Or
Absolutely.
if I'm talking about the geography that's around them, did you see all these rocks here? What else do we know about rocks? Or where we were, we happen to be by a dam. Do you know about Raps Dam and what it used to be for our town that we live in, what it is now? Then we're bringing
Right.
in all of these historical options around us. We're making those science of relations connections to literature. Do you know what I actually think that they were playing now that I think about it? We had been reading Hatchet, and so if you have ever read that book, it's a kid who was in an airplane and it crashed, and so he had to survive on his own. And
Okay.
so I think that's actually, now that I'm looking at this, what they were playing, although there was two of them, but they were playing that they had to survive, and that's why they're pretending that they're eating there. So all of these different connections that they're doing through their play
Yeah.
or through their different activities. So, whew, all right.
Cool.
So we've spent all this time observing, right? And we're like,
Yeah.
awesome. And I do want to say there is on my website, it's called the reverse learning checklist, I think is what it's called, reverse learning checklist. And that kind of gives you a way to observe all of those things, to take an activity and break it down and be able
Oh,
to see
okay.
all
That
of
would be
those.
helpful.
Yeah. There's also, and Peggy, I can send you a link to this. There's it's an AI, and now I cannot think of it off the top of my head, but I can send you a link to it, that if you put in this AI, like brushing your teeth, it'll break it down to all these different steps and
Ah.
say the ways that it, or the
Is it
skills.
Chat GPT? If you can say,
No, it's
put
not
down the,
ChatGPT.
okay.
Um,
Okay.
Oh, I'll send it to you because now it's really bothering me that I don't remember
Oh,
what it's called. But we will make sure that you have that option.
well, that's great, especially if you want to build like a visual schedule and
Yeah.
stuff. And so
Mhm.
then it's just, yeah.
Yeah, when you need
Gives
to
you
be
all
able to
those
break
little
down, like,
pieces
what are
you
these
can put
steps?
there and
Because
take
sometimes when
follow
you're
up.
just automatically doing things, you're not like, oh, at first I turn on the water, then I get my,
Right,
it's hard
exactly.
to think through everything you're breaking down.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
so now let's think about the environments and how, if we have observed all of these things, now what do we do?
Right.
So recognize, obviously, that learning is occurring everywhere. But again, like,
Absolutely.
we still want to think about what are the best environments for our kids. So if we're thinking about the time of day, that we're going to approach them with something, the
Yeah.
place that we are we doing this inside? Are we doing this outside? Are we doing this at the table or whatever? And the setup of the activity, also very important.
Oh, yeah.
So here, if you can see, this is my little guy, or Caleb, that I was talking to you about before, who did not. I mean, this is when he was really still beginning to write, around age 9, I think. And at that point, he was doing some copy work, right? I
Mhm.
think that's a speech or something that he was writing. And I had to cover up part of the paper. I also put it on a slant board
Ah,
in front of him. So he's not looking left to right. So Caleb has visual scanning insufficiency. His eye muscles were not strong enough to help him to scan across a page to read. So if I had set that book up next to him, where he had to look over to the left
oh, yes.
and read, and then he had to write it down, would not be working. But you can see on this picture, his font is tiny. Like, it's not a matter that I needed to have really big words,
Right.
because acuity was fine, but it was the visual scanning. So actually, the smaller words and columns there were easier for him, and
Wow.
looking up and down a lot easier. So, very, thinking, I knew that because of my observation skills. And that's how it has carried over. So, how do we accommodate in our own environments to do that?
Right.
Um, let's see. So someone else had mentioned in here, there was a question, how do I know if I'm pushing him hard or not challenging him enough? That was one that came in
Yes. Yep.
before.
Deborah had asked that.
Yes. So I think that is really important when we're going through these observation skills, how to recognize with our own specific kids. So when we are seeing, so for Caleb, and I can only give you an example of my own, right? But for Caleb, we call this the zone of like your alertness, right? Your optimal
Right.
alertness, where you can really focus and do. He's in, like, handwriting right there. He's in. But there are a lot of times when he was like really down on it, he could not get himself to focus to be able to attend to it. This is when I would see him slouching. This is when I would see him
Yes.
needing some more movement, or like kind of crawling away from an activity until he could run around and get moving.
Right.
Right. So you're going to know this by your own specific kid. He also would, as he's watching or, writing, if he would start to get frustrated, I could see with his hand, he would start writing a lot harder. What he was trying to do, that's called
Ah.
proprioception. He's trying to get pressure through more and more of his joints to help calm his nervous system. So I could
Yes.
see that that is happening. And it didn't, not because he was needing to, press harder,
Right.
to be able to see it, but because he was starting to get frustrated and trying to calm his body. So what we would need to do is say, like, that's cool. I see that you're doing that. I would give him that language. I see that you're pressing really hard to
Yes.
calm your body. Is that working for you?
Yeah.
Cool. If it's working, I'm not
Mhm.
going to tell him to stop, right? If that's
Right.
working, great.
Mhm.
But if it's not, what are some other things? Let's do some push-ups. Let's, take a break and go for a walk around and come back to it. We really just want to make sure that they also are becoming in tune with their bodies and what is
Right.
hard, what is not, so that then they can advocate for themselves.
Exactly. Because eventually they're gonna start putting those things in
Yeah.
themselves, and
Mhm,
that's
mhm.
what you want for them to do, because eventually you're not gonna be there. I mean,
Right.
my youngest just started college, and I'm not peering over her
Yeah.
shoulder, making sure that she's doing her stuff the right
Yeah,
way. Yeah.
no, absolutely. Like, that self-advocacy is almost more important than if you can actually copy that work,
Yes.
because
Mhm.
you might need to later on, you get a job and you have to sit in a meeting, and whether you can take notes or not will matter. And if you can't do that, like, you can't physically write it, if you can say, hey, I'm going to record what's happening here because
Right.
that's the best
Exactly.
way that I can make sure it gets done.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
don't know that, or you can't advocate for it,
Right.
you're out of luck. Your boss doesn't
Mhm.
care,
Yeah,
right?
your job's gonna be
You
very
just
short.
see he's not doing it. So,
Absolutely.
um, I would spend a lot of time, Debbie, again, Deborah, there is interoception is probably a good thing for you to look up. That's that self-awareness. It's the internal, it's the sense of understanding what's going on inside of your body, how hungry, tired, thirsty you are, but also things like, when do you need to go to the bathroom? But also things like, I understand my emotion here. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling underwhelmed. Like if your child can start to recognize that within themselves, they can tell it to you. So that would be a really good thing to look up. There's also there's a resource on my website, a blog about interoception. Kelly Mailer is another occupational therapist who does a lot of work on interoception. And Kara Kosinski is another OT and homeschool mom who wrote a book called, oh goodness, I have it up here. I think it's How I Feel? Well, I don't know. How I Feel, I think is what it is. And that is a book on interoception.
Okay.
So that would be another good resource to check in there. And I think, let's see, Carrie had asked about how to share ideas about how to, incorporate OT ideas in with basic subject teaching times.
Oh, yes.
And so, I mean, that's kind of hard if I don't know your OT goals, that I can really give you very specific things, but having these observations, right? So knowing where my child is with motor skills, with cognitive skills, with social skills, you can start to build that in. So for example, with Caleb, I knew, like, we talked about the stability, right? For him to be able to write, and the vision, and to be able to visually scan. So I would do things like, he would be on a scooter and he would pull himself forward. I'd have letters laid out on the floor. He would find that letter and we would go back the other way. And then we would spell words that way. So these are things where I knew the motor skills that he needed to work on. I knew the cognitive skills he needed to work on. And so we just did that throughout our day. And that's really, honestly, that's what OTs do. We're looking at these small skills and figuring out how can a person be successful in what they need and want to do. So it's breaking those down. If you do need more like specific help on that, asking your own OT, like, what skills do you see that they need to be working on? How can I do that at home would be great. Or that's part of what I do as homeschool OT as well.
Yeah. And Deborah had asked again, what was that? And I looked it up. Interoception, spelled it and stuck it in the description on YouTube. So
perfect.
hopefully
Yes, interoception. Good. I'm so glad. So here is kind of how we worked in through our day, like thinking of the time of day, our homeschool. And this again is just a sample, but to accommodate people's needs and those small strengths or small skills that we're building. So
just, stepping back. So you don't do this until after you've done all that observation and kind of figured out where the needs are and just how your students and yourself can manage that.
Yep. Because we need to really think about what are those skills that we're trying to build that are going to carry over. So then once we know that those skills are, then we want to adjust our environment to make that happen for them.
Yep.
So this is just the example of kind of how I did it with my kiddos. And I have 3 that are home with me all the time. But so when we would do our morning time, I would be reading to them and they would be moving around the kitchen and making their own breakfast. This started back, my kids now are 15, 12, and 7. But when we started homeschooling, they were 8, 6, and 1. So clearly my 1-year-old was not cooking breakfast for himself.
Right.
But I was putting Cheerios out on his or whatever, putting stuff on his, high chair tray that he's eating. And he was in there with us the entire time at the beginning. And their goals were different. I wasn't like expecting him to be able to narrate back to me whatever I'm reading, but he was in there, and he's present around with my other kiddos. And it is pretty amazing the stuff that he would pick up and say later on, and quite beautiful. So again, there is very few times when they were younger and even now where I expected them to be very, sitting still looking at me, crisscross applesauce, like that just wasn't a requirement. Instead, and this is one of those that was, how do you involve younger siblings in your learning? That's a question from Shayla. And so this is how we would do it. In the morning as we were eating breakfast is when I would read. And now we still do that now. It's about an hour long where I read some of our history stuff together. We do a hymn study. We read the Bible. We watch the news, a 10-minute news segment. So all of that stuff still happens in the morning as we're reading. It's part of the culture of our home.
Mm.
And then after that, I would add in some chore time because they needed to move. And
Absolutely.
that is also building in some functional learning, right?
Yes.
So mowing the lawn, now that my son is older, that gives him proprioception. It helps him to calm his body down. Vacuuming, when they were washing windows, that is core strength. That's that same stability that I was talking about
Right.
before. Core strength, shoulder strength, so you're able to move your hands. Those are building the skills that you directly need. So for academic activities. And then there would be
Absolutely.
some, independent work. So whatever it was that they wanted to do, or whether they were playing, based on their
Mhm.
ages or whatever. When they were younger, we would call it bath math, and I would put my youngest kiddos in the bath, and so that they were, playing and they were secure and safe.
Right?
And my oldest would be writing her math on the bathroom mirror because
Oh.
I tell you how excited she would be to be writing the, in there rather than her paper. But
Oh,
it was in the
absolutely.
mirror. Everybody was safe, contained, and it was one way that we would, make
Oh,
that
that's
happen.
an awesome idea. Love
Yeah,
it.
good old bath math.
Mhm.
um, Now at this point, like I said, they're a lot older, so they're moving between things on their own,
Right.
and then able to work with me. Oh no, don't you hear them in the
Yes.
background?
Just adds a little bit of reality there.
Yes, yep, there it is, working homeschool mom, here we are.
Yes.
Um, Lunch, and for lunch, I think I have a picture of this. Yes, this is what we do for lunch. It was not my original idea. I believe it came from Elsie Udicello. She does Farmhouse Schoolhouse on Instagram, but she called it Lit Lunch, and it was just like
Mhm.
so beautiful. She lit candles and they would read literature while they were eating. And that is what we started doing from the get-go, is that my daughter reads, I read, we listen to an audiobook, something
Yep.
like that. And while we eat lunch, it brings everybody together. We've got some family time. But that is part of our environment of kind of calming some things down before
Absolutely.
we move into the
Yeah.
afternoon. So let
I
me go back
figured,
there.
I did the same thing, and my kids would listen much longer to a
Yeah.
book if they had
Mhm.
food in front of them.
Absolutely. Your mouth is busy. It cannot be talking.
Right, exactly.
We're getting all of that together. And then some, time outside in the afternoons or
Absolutely.
doing whatever. Now they're, running all over the place to go to sports and all of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah.
So I got to speed through the end. I didn't realize how
Yeah.
long-winded I would be, but so seeking out activities, so now we've observed those skills. We're setting up an environment, recognizing like what are their strengths, what are the skills that we need to be building, how can we
Absolutely.
cater specifically to you, and then looking at it activities either to boost those skills to build them, or
Right.
to like because they're strengths of theirs, and we want you to feel successful, right? So
Absolutely.
what can you do within your home? We talked about chores a little bit. That was that building that stability, reading aloud, clearly different curriculums that focus on your strengths. If you've got a kiddo who has really good stability, loves reading and writing, great, let's do a lot more tabletop stuff. If you do not, then that is not the way to go. You might
Right.
be needing to crawl on your scooter and find your letters.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you might be learning through videos and games or exercise. Guys, like the biggest thing here is individualized. That is the beautiful thing
Absolutely.
of
That
homeschooling.
yeah. Yeah.
And then thinking about outside of the home, I will say over and over and over that hockey like changed Caleb's life because that whole, visual scanning, he was so very motivated to
Yes.
scan for a hockey puck, not
Mhm.
motivated to read
Scan for a
letters,
word.
right?
Yeah.
Not the same. Not the same. Very
Ah,
motivated to go out on a hike, look through binoculars and find a bird and then draw it. He loved that. So we did that over and
wow.
over because it's the
Yes.
same, that's that same skill, but looks different than just reading, sitting at home and reading. I
Absolutely.
had to
You
really pay
personalized it.
attention. Yes, what are those skills that we need to build? He also loves he's craved movement his whole life. And there,
Mhm.
again, there's other podcasts and things, sensory balanced, that I talk about that stuff. But being able to skate and spin and dive on the ground and ram into the walls, have other people
Right.
ram into the walls. Never will it be the thing that I want to do.
Right.
But for him it is, you know.
That's why you find other people that are excited about that and send them off.
Yes, yes, make it happen. Martial arts, I think, is a very underrated thing. It is fantastic for learning all of those motor skills, but also you're working at your own pace, and so it's not quite the same competition, especially for kids who are not, really inclined to want to compete against others. That's not the social skill that they want to work towards. That matching their knowledge, they do not want that one.
Mhm.
But martial arts, even if, especially if you have kids who are kind of rivaling against each other, doing something side by side where they're working at their own speed is really beautiful. So
Oh, yeah.
my oldest too did that for quite a bit of time, and really worked and learned things together. Plus, when you're having to punch a punching bag, that that can also be very helpful in life. So,
Right. Exactly. Then they let you spar, and then you can beat up
yes,
on each other,
there you go.
and it's allowed.
In a controlled way, and look at how you're learning to calibrate that force, right?
Right, exactly, yes.
Um, yeah, and so last but not least, like we said, use their interest. This is Caleb now. This was literally a couple weeks ago, or not last week.
Yeah, I
Um,
saw you post this video up
oh, did you?
on social
Yeah.
media, yeah.
Yeah. So he was reading, those are his Latin vocabulary words and he now still with vision. It is remarkable now. I mean, he's, like I said, reading and writing and just absolutely beautiful. But, speaking of hockey, his coaches are like, you have to be able to keep your head up and know where that puck is, or else someone's going to check you and you could literally die. I
Right.
mean, you can have a big, it could be really bad. So you have to know how to do that. Your eyes have to be strong enough. So that's what he's working on here. He's so interested in that,
Right.
wants to do well with it, and completely happy to be looking at vocab words because it's helping in both sides. So a
Yeah.
way to just add in some academic work to their interests.
Yeah,
So
and that's a question that Deb had just asked on YouTube. She said, "How do you build skills that are not their strengths?" And I think Sarah just did an amazing job of kind of really bringing that all together. It's really does. It focuses around their interests, and you just have to
mhm,
be creative with
mhm,
that.
mhm. Yeah. Um, I think if we're thinking about motor skills and stuff, like how to build those throughout, I mean, there are so many things you can do within your day that's functional. So, adding them into cooking with you, ripping up your kale, cutting your vegetables, pouring something into a pot. Like all of those are going to use those same motor skills, but they're doing it alongside of you.
Right.
So once you
Mhm.
recognize, like, what are these skills that they really need to build, you're going to start to see it across different environments, across different
Yeah.
activities. And so that's how oh, I see that you're having a hard time opening that box of cereal. What, how much force can you use? Let's practice ripping on other paper. So
Yes.
you're adding it in. Or, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it's
You
hard
could
for
even
you
make a
to.
craft out of ripped paper,
Yeah,
and
right.
just then they could, if they're artistic, then
Hmm.
yeah, you're using
Yep.
that.
Yep. Or I know you really love gardening. Can you find all the green beans on this giant plant? Wow, that's really hard, guys.
Yeah, there's always one that's hiding behind something that you never find,
All
and it sounds like you.
the time. All the time. So, yeah, so finding what is it that they are interested in and seeing, oh, can we pull those skills in other ways?
Right.
So guys, that is my main thing. Here's our summary. We are everybody is unique. We are all God's handiwork. We all
Yes.
have these unique works that God's prepared in advance for us to do. So if we can help our children to
Yep.
participate in these, knowing that there isn't one right or wrong way, but that they all have these underlying skills, then we
Absolutely.
consider, those skills within the person. We can adjust the environment. We can choose activities that are going to help, and we're going to boost their learning.
Absolutely. Yeah. Beautiful, Sarah. Well said, and so much great information and content. I think we've all just been fed the last hour, and
I hope so.
and yeah, it really does. What we said at the very beginning. we miss these things, and then we realize we've missed them a lot of times too late. And we have this privilege to be able to share, Sarah's sharing this information with you. I hope you really take it and grasp it and say, it isn't just about the books. It isn't just about the checklist and the schedule, but it's about my child. And it's about really seeing where this child is struggling way back. Let's take a step back, take a couple steps back, and make this the best school year ever by making it about what they need. So beautiful. Love it. So talk a little bit about your website, what people can find there. I will definitely share some of those links that you shared with me as well as resources, but I'm going to put your website up and share that.
So I'm at homeschoolot.com, and on there you can find there are resources, many blogs that I have. There's also a shop. I run some specific classes on if we're looking at breaking these skills down, executive functioning skills, on sensory processing, and then also on handwriting. So looking specifically at those skills that are inclined in handwriting. And then I also have a membership, which has weekly office hours for just question and answer, but also some resources and things inside of there. You can find all of that at Homeschool OT. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook sharing, some reels and videos. Like you said, you saw that one of my kid. I love that. That makes me so happy. So.
Well, Sarah has amazing resources, so you'll definitely want to check out Homeschool OT. And just want to thank you all for joining us for this broadcast. It has been information packed, and so if you didn't catch it all the first time, watch it again. Slow it down, stop it where you need it, and just get the information that you need to make your school year amazing and to really stop the frustration. I think we run into so much frustration with our kids and realize that it's just because we're not meeting them where they need to be met. And Sarah's really laid out a really amazingly simple yet profound way to do that. So thanks again, Sarah. I appreciate you and all you're doing. Keep up the good work. You're doing some amazing stuff, and we're excited about all that, and that we can send parents to you for your expertise.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. So that's the end of this broadcast. Next time, we're going to be talking about optimizing experiential child-directed learning opportunities. So kind of a little bit of an continuation of this topic. And really our last conversation was really leading up to this. We just had the broadcast or podcast that I did 2 days ago was kind of really setting you up for what Sarah just talked about. So it's amazing how God works all that together with only guests. Right? So you definitely want to join us for that. So check out Homeschool OT. And again, check out all of our resources here at spedhomeschool.com. And we'll see you all again next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This is Empowering Homeschool Conversations, provided by Sped Homeschool. Go to spedhomeschool.com to get resources and support for teaching your unique learner at home.